the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Authentic Audio Productions, professional podcast help for you and your business. Big time tools, content creation, hosts, anything you need to get from A to Z with your podcast today. Visit AuthenticAudioPro.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, October 14th. Another wild week of the NFL. Busy week, right? NBA preseason, NHL's underway. WNBA finals are here. Lots to talk about, lots to get to on Spot Track. Tracking it all, by the way. WNBA free agency right around the corner. We are primed and ready on that. The Major League Baseball offseason for all but 4 teams is underway. We are ready for that. We have officially flipped the switch to 2025 with our Major League Baseball data. We have projected arbitration estimates. We have pre-arb players. We're building out full 40-man rosters for 2025 on Spot Track right now with the help of Dan Solman. So you can start to figure out where your team sits. And speaking of which, we've officially flipped the switch on the Oakland Athletics to just athletics, which is, I think, how it's going to be for the next 3 years. So the Oakland moniker has been taken away. If you're looking for that data, it's just athletics right now. Obviously, going backwards, you can search for Oakland Athletics data, but just the A's going forward indefinitely until this Vegas stuff happens for sure. And as you might imagine, they're pulling up the rear on 2025 projections. So always a tradition like no other. The Oakland Athletics projected arbitration pool. A little bit of baseball, a little bit of football today, because it's that time of year. We'll start with the NLCS. I posted a financial guide to these rosters yesterday for the Mets and the Dodgers, and it's, for the most part, a fairly balanced situation, right? This is, if we talk about all 4 teams, the final 4 Major League Baseball teams, and we're talking about tax salaries, which is really the more important dollar figure to be dealing with on a yearly basis. The final 4 teams from tax salary standpoint are 1, 2, 3, and 21. That's the Mets, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Guardians, respectively speaking. So, as usual, this is a pay-to-play league. If you put in the work, and by the way, a lot of the work that the Mets did this year was subtraction, retained salary, not so much the active roster. In fact, if I flip the switch to the active tax, the Mets dropped to 4th, Yankees 1st, Dodgers 2nd, Phillies 3rd, Yankees 4th, Cleveland still 21st if with just active tax payroll. Yep, I get it that that's a little convoluted because of the deferred payment to Ohtani, which dropped his $70 million average down to 46 for tax purposes. I don't need to hear that again. I've heard it 97,000 times from people. I promise you I know it. I knew it when it happened, and I knew it when it happened the other 250 times with Major League Baseball contracts, because deferred payments have been around way longer than we have. Okay, this has been just part of the game. It's not a loophole. It is an accounting tactic that even NHL teams are starting to utilize. All right. It's legal, it's smart, and it takes 2 sides. It's a 2-way street. Nobody has ever done it to this length because nobody's ever signed a $70 million per year contract. Let's just put it that way. Max Scherzer signed big contracts and deferred most of that money. He's still reaping those benefits from the Washington Nationals as we speak. So it's not uncommon. Most of the big contracts, especially with certain teams, operate this way. It's just the size, the grandeur, and obviously the amount that was deferred became headlines from SpotTrack.com to the Today Show. All right, so I get it. This is the big version of everything, but it's been here forever. So it's not a loophole. It's not disgusting. It's not cheating. It's the Dodgers swinging big with a gigantic number, $700 million. I don't think there was another team out there, having done the research, that was even close to that number. And in return, Ohtani said, I'm not going to let this hamper our roster for the next 10 years. Let's split this thing off into deferred payments so you can sign Yamamoto and Tyler Glasnow, etc. Let's stay there for a second. Let's get off this payroll thing and stay there with the Dodgers, who absolutely spanked my Mets last night, and that's just okay. That happens in game ones more often than not. Home team, fresh, a lot of energy, And we'll see what happens in game 2 to see if this thing can balance out a little bit. But this Dodgers situation it's been fascinating for a while because it kind of felt like at certain times during the year that this team was just kind of going through the motions and wasn't the Goliath it's been in past years. Mookie went on a big slump there for a bit, and the injuries just continued to pile up. Well, oh, by the way, and I'm not even sure people realize this because we're just kind of watching in the present right now. This was the best team in baseball by 3 games. Okay. It was Dodgers, Phillies, then Yankees in terms of regular season record. Dodgers went 98-64. Now, they didn't go 110 or 105 like they have in past years, but best team in baseball in terms of wins, best team in baseball in terms of run differential at a plus 156. The second in that regard is the Yankees at plus 147. So a quiet year and an absolutely destructively injured year, which I'll get to in a second, for the Dodgers, still turned into number 1 overall seed in baseball, best run differential in baseball, status quo. So I realized that the Padres gave them a really good effort and kind of bully-balled them a little bit. This is the team, okay? And by the way, this is the team without any significant starting pitching. And I would have included Jack Flaherty in that until yesterday when he went Clayton Kershaw on the Mets at 7+ innings. But if we go back to day 1 and all the things that they squeezed into this roster, large part because they're a huge market, LA, with a lot of postseason success, which adds more revenue, and a $68 million deferral from Ohtani. All those things together allowed them to piece some pieces together, obviously, this offseason. But to start the year, this was going to be Tyler Glasnow, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Walker Buehler, Bobby Miller, Gavin Stone, and eventually Clayton Kershaw, who they signed back. Guess how many of those pitchers are available for the NLCS? Yamamoto, okay? And to some degree, Buehler. We'll see. That's it. That's it. Okay? They're banged up. Right now, it's Yamamoto, Buehler, Flaherty, and Knack as their 4 starting pitchers on the NLCS roster. Glasnow out indefinitely. Bobby Miller out indefinitely. Gavin Stone just underwent surgery 2 days ago. Out indefinitely. He's going to miss the entire 2025 season. Buehler's been up and down and really has been a shell of himself since returning from 2 major surgeries. Yamamoto missed significant time this year. And Ohtani didn't pitch a pitch. And that was obviously baked into the cake. Tony Gonsolin, nothing. Dustin May, nothing. Kershaw, a couple of good starts. Who knows if he can return at any point in time, not this year, but next year. They have been absolutely the biggest revolving door at the starting pitching role all season. And they were the best team in baseball with the best run differential and have the best odds to win the World Series right now at the finish line. So I went a long way to tell you this. That's how freaking good Ohtani is. Because Freeman didn't have an MVP year. Betts didn't have an MVP year. He had moments. But I think in large part, he considered it a pretty mild year for him. The collective of Freeman and Betts and Muncy and Ohtani and Will Smith is obviously going to be, even from just a paper projection standpoint, better than almost any other team in baseball. What they've assembled here is no slouch. And I'm not trying to make them underdogs or in any way seem like I'm saying they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But they're doing it with adversity. And they've done it all year with adversity. And there are not many franchises that can be as deep, as well structured, and as next man up in this game, in this sport specifically, as the Dodgers have been this year. So we're quiet on them right now because the Mets have been such an explosive story. The Yankees are always going to dominate, in Dallas Cowboys fashion. And the Guardians had no business winning the division and sneaking themselves into the ALCS, but here they are. So they're the Cinderella story. So there's all these other labels around them, and the Dodgers are just the Dodgers, except for they're even more impressive than they've been. because of the adversity, because Ohtani isn't pitched, and because what Ohtani has done as a batter is so far ahead and so far away from every other thing we've ever seen. This is his team. This is his team. He took a pitch off the handle yesterday and put it 394 to the center field warning track. All right. He is, if you haven't seen him in person, he's the biggest, strongest freak you've ever seen play baseball. And I mean that in the non-steroids era. And he has single-handedly carried this team from a consistency standpoint from day one to day 175, where we are today. That's what this is. And they shouldn't be discounted. They shouldn't be discounted, and they shouldn't be asterisks because of deferred payment. Again, this shit's been happening for 35, 40 years. They took it to the next level because they were able to take it to the next level, because the player and the agent said, sure, this sounds great. Let's do this. Now go sign that guy. And they did that. They didn't just take the money and put it in their back pockets, Jerry Jones. Okay. They used it on a pitcher that is going to start game 2 and could put them in the driver's seat to get to the World Series in a week. So it's exactly what you want in a large market. The gas pedal is consistently down. They are in on every big player. Guess what? They're going to make an offer to Juan Soto. They're going to. Guess what? They're going to make an offer to Blake Snell and Corbin Burns, because there's no reason for them not to. There's no reason. Now, will it be a top of the market, best offer out there? Probably not. They've earned the right to be able to lowball a little bit because they're the Dodgers, because of years like this, because it takes a village, not one house. And that needed to be said, I think. The Dodgers have been so good for so long that there's a bit of a fatigue factor, I think, somewhat like the Chiefs in the NFL, that we just kind of take it for granted. But the adversity they've gone through in the rotation and in the bullpen has been completely usurped by a magical year from Ohtani, standard to above standard years from Freeman and Betts, to name a few, and just some blockbuster performances, not unlike the one we saw from Jack Flaherty last night against the Mets. So we'll see where this thing carries out. But the fact that they did what they did, having gone through what they went through, is already impressive and worthy of more discussion from their end alone. The Guardians are a great story. And it's a team we track closely. It's SpotTrack's MLB expert Dan Soman's favorite team for life. So the fact that both the Mets and the Guardians are in this thing is exciting from a SpotTrack standpoint. I can tell you that right now. We're going to be watching closely pitch by pitch. But this is a team that is built for exactly what they are, a small market team that has to develop and has to continually bring players from the bottom up into a world that fits their system, a system that was changed over from Terry Francona to Stephen Vogt this year and didn't skip a beat. In fact, might have been re-energized in some degree, right? The David Frys, the Stephen Kwans, and even some of the deadline acquisitions like Elaine Thomas have just been next man up philosophy. And it's exactly what it always seems to be with this team. We discount them early. We knock them out in May. Then by July 4th, we're looking at this team like, damn, they're hanging around, right? They're 3 games up. Their schedule looks good for the next 2.5 months. And here they are, exactly where they've been for most of this decade, which is atop the division and doing some damage in the postseason. Now with maybe a couple of extra bats that can knock the ball out of the ballpark, something they didn't have last year when they fizzled out a little bit early. So it's a good, worthy matchup with the Yankees. We'll see what they can do. The weather's going to be iffy for the most of this week, so that's going to be an impact both in Cleveland and in New York. And Cleveland can play small ball. They've done it a lot. They're not just a one-dimensional team. They, like the Dodgers, have developed 11 starting pitchers, like we heard us talk about with Dan last week. It's going to be a rotation. It's going to take the village. They do have the village. I'm not sure the Yankees have that. So slight edge with the staff and the bullpen to the Guardians. But if the Yankees bats are hot, I don't think there's a way around it. And everybody in the league knows that. That's how the Yankees operate. And it just takes one big week from those bats to put them into the next round. I think the betting odds say that's exactly what should happen, but certainly worth a watch. We'll see where it gets to. In terms of off-season stuff, because again, we flipped the switch over to 2025, there's some juicy options to get to. That'll probably be a show next week with Dan, because he's done most of the work on projecting these things. So here's what happened. Here's what we did here to kind of prep for the off-season. Every free agent has a market valuation. You can go and yay or nay any of them that you want. There's a whole market valuation page on SpotTrack, and I'll start doing some video tutorials and things like that to show people around. But because we do have, it's been about 6 months, but the site is sort of new, and the navigation pieces have changed quite a bit. So there's a whole market valuation tracker where you can just run through the gamut of all the values that we've got out there. Or you can go to the free agent tracker, see the list, filter the list. Every player has a market value link right there that you can go and see what we have in terms of numbers and variables and things like that. Every option has been projected in terms of 2025 rosters. So we're projecting that Garrett Cole is going to opt out, but immediately be opted back in by the Yankees. We're projecting that Blake Snell is going to opt out and hit free agency. We're projecting that the Yankees are going to decline Anthony Rizzo's $17 million club option. All those things have been done on our end, a yes or a no or a maybe, which has given us then the ability to say, all right, based on some arbitration estimates, every player has an estimated salary for 2025 right now, and some pre-arbitration estimates, we're using $800,000 for that number. We can then build out our 2025 rosters from an off-season perspective to give people an idea. If you were to go to the 2025 tax tracker on SpotTrack, we have a projected total right now. So the Dodgers right now sit atop that projected total for 2025 at almost $277 million against the $241 million threshold. That's where things stand for next year. And we'll continue to massage that work as players get designated and non-tendered and arbitration figures actually lock in, invest, and et cetera. But that's the process we're going to start with. We're trying to give you the whole picture early, and we'll obviously update that with actuality as things happen, because it happens kind of quickly. And then there's a lull through the holidays, and then we get to like mid-January, early February, and that's when things start to slam, right? Arbitration players who actually go through the process get their final numbers. Free agency really starts to pick up steam as we get towards pitchers and catchers reporting. And then the 40-man stuff really starts to come into play. So, like I said, it's kind of like two different versions, right? There's an A and B of free agency this offseason. And we just want to be ready with as much information as we can give you now, so that we can continue to reflect things as they change really over the course of the next 6 months, which is what it's going to be. All right, some NFL stuff quickly. Haason Reddick has changed agents. The agent's CAA, Tory Dandy, dumped him last week after... I would assume not being able to get through to him, not being able to get to the Jets in a way that would suffice Haason Reddick's needs, right? None of this is coming together the way that anybody wanted it to. So it's now Drew Rosenhaus's baby to massage, and we'll see what we can get to. But I will say this. When I saw the news this morning that the Rosenhaus agency has taken over this situation, my first thought was this is going to get done rather quickly. And here's why. And this is not a knock on the agent. I think every league needs an agent like this. And what the Rosenhaus contract has been largely, right? Tyreek Hill, Antonio Brown for a while, is let's get as much cash as we can into now, today. And then we'll float a year or two in kind of mediocrity from a cash standpoint. And then we'll tack on some big, heavy salaries into either the final year or the final 2 years of whatever contract we're negotiating here, so that the marketability of this contract can max out. Okay, so Tyreek Hill just did an extension, for instance, with the Miami Dolphins after Waddle and all these other guys got theirs. And obviously 7 other wide receivers reset the market, right? So Hill went 3 for $90. And if we look at the cash breakdown, it's $26.25 this year when it was going to be 19.7. Again, big time cash pulled forward. It's 27.7 next year again, which is a little bit more than he was set to make. And then it's $36 million in 2026 when he's 32 years old. That's sort of what I'm saying here. That's what I expect this to be for Haason Reddick. This is what the Jets tried to do, by the way. They tried to inflate his 2020-24 salary, but that's it. Okay, they want him on a one-year deal. They bought him, they acquired him for this year, and then we'll see. And by the way, it's good business. It's good business by the Jets. Now they're going to be talked into a Rosenhaus structured contract, which might look a hell of a lot like I just laid out with Tyreek Hill, which is one of the reasons I think this marriage is going to get resolved quickly. Let's bring a ton of cash into now. And by the way, you're going to have to talk about the over almost $11 million that he's lost. Okay, so it's $5 million in salary, $4.5 million in fines, and 1.4 and then in additional discretionary stuff based on him, not reporting to the team or at any point in time, training camp, anything, preseason. We're at about 11 million. And the fine part of this, and I know I've said this, it's worth repeating. The fine part of this is not recoupable. The Jets can't say out of good faith, we're going to alleviate those. The latest CBA does not allow teams to do this for a reason. Okay, for this reason. They don't want players to get up on this one. Players should have to report. So he's not getting that money back. So the only way for him to get that money back essentially is for him to negotiate that money into this new contract. So he was at a point where it was going to be 14.5 plus incentives this year. That was the starting point salary. Okay, we're down to about 9 in just base salary remaining. And like I said, we're about 11 short. So if he just were to play out the rest of his contract with no changes, he'd earn $9 million for the rest of the year, but he'd be losing 11. So he'd be playing for negative $2 million this year. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So what's it going to take, just from 2024's standpoint, to get him in the door and keep the Jets happy? Well, I can tell you right now that from a number standpoint, and I've said this before, but it's worth reiterating, it's not like this guy doesn't have a legitimate craw. I mean, he has been one of the most effective pass rushers in football each of the last 4 seasons, without a doubt. Okay? That's been with Arizona, Carolina, and the last 2 years in Philadelphia. He is getting home. Now, he's not racking up, run defense tackles. He's not a complete player, but he's damn good at this. He's in the conversation at 30 years old for upwards of, $50 million guaranteed over the next 2 years. I think those days are gone, right? You can't just talk about the math right now. You have to talk about the whole package, the whole resume. And this holdout is part of that resume. And the Jets do have leverage now. The Jets do have the ability to say no thanks as their season sort of crumbles. So where does this end up? Well, it's certainly not going to be 3 for 90, right? I'm not sitting here saying that Tyreek Hill's contract is going to be Haason Reddick's contract. That's not where we're headed here with 30-year-old Haason Reddick. But if he's got $11 million to make up, and he's got about $9 million left this year, that's a pretty round number, right? I think we can get ourselves to a world where this is essentially a 3 for 60 with $20 million this year, less than that next year, and a big old inflated 2026 salary to stay with the Rosenhaus structure. All of it, obviously, the remainder of 2024 is guaranteed. Much of that is a signing bonus. A portion of 2025 is guaranteed, maybe some sort of March roster bonus, with the knowledge that the Jets may just look to trade him next March. Hell, they may look to trade him before this deadline, depending on how this all goes down. But it does seem like Rosenhaus and the Jets have a handle on things right now, even just a couple days in. So fully guaranteed $20 million this year, to account for everything that's happened. And I realize that's gonna cause some eye rolls. I'm with you on that one. A portion of next year guaranteed, because I'm not sure why you would fully guarantee this player right now. That doesn't make any sense for the Jets. With the intent of, we're going to see where we stand on March 12th, and there's a world where before we pay this roster bonus, we might ship you off to Detroit or ship you off to the Rams or something like that. So I think everybody can sort of win out here. Reddick can recoup the money that he's lost. Not, unfortunately. The Jets can get a pass rusher for the next 12 weeks. And we can sort of move forward with this whole process. So I was actually really pleased to see this agency group taking on the onus, because they are aggressive. They know how to handle these short-term situations very well. And I expect that's exactly what's going to happen. So we'll see. All right, and finally, Aidan Hutchinson, nasty injury. We knew we were going to get one or two of these every year. This is unfortunate for the whole Lions franchise, obviously for Hutchinson himself, who I had just called out in the recent NFL extension piece, because he will be extension eligible for the first time after 2024. And he started his career with 10 sacks, 12 sacks, and already had 8 through 2024 in just the 5 games played. It's brutal across the board. It probably means Hutchinson doesn't get his extension until he returns to good health and is able to play out some semblance of 2025 in his fourth year. Luckily, obviously, this is a first-round pick. He's got his 5th-year option in 2026. So both he and the Lions have time to do this right. But there is no question that this man is every bit worth the number 2 overall pick, that he is going to be the cornerstone defensive player for this Lions franchise. It's just a dream for Dan Campbell, by the way. And it just sounds like one of those guys that has it. You know what I mean? The way people, former players, current players, talk about this guy already, it's not just from a production standpoint. There's an aura around him. And I think you saw that on full display, unfortunately, when he went down, and the emotions were coming out from everybody around that franchise organization, really on both sides of the ball. That's what this player is. Just to bring it back home a little bit, this is a player that through 2.5 years of his career is a $32 million player in our system. Again, not just the sacks, but forced fumbles. He's got 4 interceptions somehow as a defensive end. Almost 75 tackles already. It's the whole package. It's everything you want it to be. The Lions may just say, screw it. We know where this is going. This is going to be the next highest paid non-quarterback. Let's just get this done as he recovers. But it was a nasty injury, broken tibia, that the Lions have already reported. Probably going to be a lengthy rehab. You probably need to at least make sure that he can get back to being Aidan Hutchinson before you lock him into the $100 million guaranteed it's going to take. So terrible from every angle. It's certainly something we're going to have to continue to monitor on our end, because this was going to be one of the big off-season extensions, and it just might not be anymore. There's no question about that. And it certainly changes, at least a little bit, the outlook for the Detroit Lions in 2024. We will see now if this makes them somewhat aggressive at the trade deadline to sort of fill this need. Obviously not 1-to-1, but is there a player out there that can at least put some fingers in the ground and get it done from a depth perspective that the Lions can look to add by the November 5th deadline? Okay. Hockey stuff's underway. We're making those moves on a daily basis. Like I said, I'm going to start doing some quick tutorials about some of the pages on our site, especially as they pertain seasonally. So a lot of Major League Baseball off-season stuff, some NFL roster management stuff as we get towards that deadline. NBA is just about to tip off here. Scott and Keith have been absolutely hammering not only 2024 5 stuff, but next year's projections for cap purposes and tax purposes, because moves that happen today are going to impact the apron work for next year. As you know, it's a 3 to 4 year budget that NBA GMs have to deal with. And kind of brilliantly, Keith has become our resident in-house NBA GM in that regard, to be able to project why things are happening, when things are happening, and if things could happen differently with certain franchises, as you heard on this show not too long ago, when he talked about the fact that the Minnesota Timberwolves probably were one move away. And I think 72 hours later, Karl Anthony Towns was a member of the New York Knicks. So he's he's right in the thick of this stuff. So if you've got questions specifically with your MBA team, at Keith Smith MBA on Twitter, and Spotrac.com for all of your information with all things sports financially related. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spotrac Podcast.